Great. Thank you all for joining us today. We're super excited to continue with our speaker series with today's talk, VIR Job Market, Different Approaches to Building Your Career, presented by Dr. Shamit Desai. Before I invite Dr. Desai to speak, I'd like to briefly introduce you to our organization for those joining us for the first time today. So, WCVI Chicago is a student-run organization dedicated to fostering early education exposure to the field of VIR. And our goal is to connect surgically minded trainees across Chicago who share a strong interest in minimally invasive approaches to patient care. And so we work towards this mission by hosting events like today's talk, hosting workshops, publishing a monthly VIR newsletter, and also organizing a mentorship program. And so through these plethora of opportunities, we hope to create more opportunities for trainees to learn more about the field while also building a strong VIR community here in Chicago. So if you're interested in learning more about our organization, we'd love for you to get connected. You can scan the QR code here, which will take you to our link tree. It has links to our membership form, a form to sign up for our mentorship program, and also you can also find our past events on YouTube. So now it's my pleasure to introduce you to our speaker for today. Dr. Shamit Desai completed his medical education at Rutgers Robert Wood Johnson Medical School. He then went on to complete both his residency and fellowship in VIR at the Feinberg School of Medicine at Northwestern University. Currently, he is the co-founder of Goth Medical and Physician Staffing Solution. He's already super busy with his work, but he's also serving as the Chicago Medical School IR Special Advisor and also the faculty advisor of our organization. So with that, I'll introduce Dr. Desai.
Thanks, Jason. Hey, everybody in the crowd. Nice to meet you. I'm gonna try to share this again. Let me know if it's working, Jason. Did that work?
No, can you share that again, please?
No? Okay.
There we go.
That works? You can
Yep.
see this. Okay, perfect. All right, everybody. So tonight's talk is going to be a bit different than a lot of IR talks that you'll probably see out there. It's a little bit deeper dive into the actual job market, something that's not actively discussed very much in med school. It's also not very much discussed in residency. So you probably won't hear many talks like this, things on financial literacy and what's actually out there for you waiting in practice, different practice models, as well as different ways to approach your career until you are out there doing it yourself. So for most of you in the audience, this is probably not going to really impact your day to day for about 10 years. So if you can pick up one or two pearls from this, I would say we had a very successful lecture. Try to keep some things in mind. Some things will be over your head, but please feel free to reach out after the lecture. I'll leave my socials and my contact at the end, and just feel free to reach out. I do serve as the advisor to Chicago Medical School as well as this organization. And since you've all signed up for this talk, I'm happy to reach out about. I'm happy to be, someone who you can reach out to discuss some of these things further or other things as you're considering a career in IR. So my early career was a bit complicated. I was employed in one job that was IRDR. It was a private equity group. I lasted there for about 10 months. Nothing really wrong with the national organization. It was more about the amount of travel I had to do between sites. So I would cover 5 hospitals on call, which were not within 20 miles of each other. You can imagine what a weekend call would be like. And I only had 4 partners. So this was quite brutal for a few months out there. I then went to private practice in Philadelphia while my wife finished her fellowship at CHOP. And I was there for a year. Great group, radiology owned, radiologist owned. Again, this was in that IRDR model. So it was you're reading diagnostic imaging and you're doing cases. And some days you're scheduled as both, and some days you're dedicated just to IR. For me, the model was very, very busy. It was challenging. It was rewarding. I still keep up telerabs right now, although I practice 100% IR. But we did return back to Chicago for family reasons. The job I just left a few months ago was another group here in Chicago, which was much more of what I was actually looking for in a career. So it was about 90% IR, dedicated clinic days. So one full day a week, and then one full day of vein clinic every 3 weeks. So you were just dedicated to the vein clinic at an outpatient center. My team of 6 IRs, we covered, a rotation of call that much. And we were compensated in call days by having the day off after a week of call. So we'd have the Monday off after a week of call. Things like that are really important as you look for a job because IR is sort of the unsung hero of all radiology practices. For a lot of diagnostic radiologists, they feel as though they're giving you the honor of doing what you were fellowship trained in. That's not really how it works. Our skill set is essential to the hospital. So you do need to advocate for yourself that there is something additional for taking call, right? A diagnostic radiologist does not really take call in the way that we do. We drive back into the hospital and do that. 99.9% of diagnostic call is now done remotely, from a workstation at home. And it's just part of their annual comp. So keep that in mind. I'm now the co-founder of 2 companies. Gotham Medical is my full-time business where we have a full contract with a hospital. I have 2 partners. We take calls 24/7, 100% IR. We do not read any imaging in this job, and we do very high-end work. And we have a full clinical practice. We've clinic 3 days a week, and it's full with 3 APPs as well as a full scheduler and access to 3 clinic rooms as well as a vein clinic. For physician staffing solutions, I run an IR-only locums company. Locums, not with the negative connotation of locums. All the companies you may have heard of or you will hear of as you move forward if you're unfamiliar are run by essentially businessmen who are not actively practicing physicians. We did this for IR due to pain points that we felt in those processes to become a vendor to help our own colleagues secure jobs at the highest rates imaginable or possible. And we'll speak about this a little further as we move on. I'm also on the private practice committee of SIR and in the Association of Chiefs in IR as I serve as the chief of Gotham Medical. And as you know, I'm the advisor for this group as well as Rosalind Franklin. So any of those opportunities, if anyone wants to discuss any of those, if there's interest in education or anything like that, big passion of mine. Love to speak and mentor you guys as you move along. So some of these slides may be worth a photo. Don't worry, we can easily send these out to you. You don't have to screenshot or anything. It's all good. We'll send these out to you. The relevance of my talk to people on this chat are basically that I am a trainee of a huge Chicago program. I trained at Northwestern. I've experienced across the academic setting, in the community, advising in these settings, in the locums model, and as an independent contractor myself. The thing to keep in mind always when you're going into IR is no matter what is being sort of discussed on forums, student doctor network, or in Ant Mini, and some things can get really toxic. Just remember, you are there for the patient and you are an end consultant. What you say goes when it comes to vascular and interventional care. There will be a lot of collaboration. You work with a lot of other physicians, but at the end of the day, your training is the most important asset you have. So keep that in mind as I go through the rest of this talk. I don't want to lose that. The patient is always the center of everything. And I want to keep that in mind. We're going to talk about money. We're going to talk about, jobs and compensation and vacation days and all these things. But just keep in mind, you want a job where you can really impact patient care. That is the most important thing when it comes to choosing a job, right? Why does this matter? So most graduates will practice outside of major academic centers. Now, most of you will train at major academic centers. However, 85 to 90% of IRs practice in private practice or out in the community. It may not be the traditional private practice where the physicians own the group, more going toward employment by the hospital or private equity-based groups. And there are multiple market forces for that. We don't have enough time for that in the lecture. But most will practice outside of that quaternary care center that a lot of you go to school at or will do your residency or fellowship at, right? These models are changing, and this is really loosely defined for IR. And we'll discuss the historic models a little bit in a second here. There are relevant economics that are now mandated to be in IR. I mean, IR economic literacy is a big part of how you will navigate the field moving forward. Keep that in mind. No one's going to do this for you, and you're most likely not going to join a physician-owned practice unless you join something like mine, where basically, we have 3 physicians. We're going to, expand to 6, 9, but there are only so many of those out there if you want to practice 100% IR. The traditional model was basically academic and private practice, right? The private practice, there were multiple different types of private practice you could be. I sort of lumped government under there, but that could be its own tab. Working for the VA, it's kind of its own thing. And you can imagine there's a lot of bureaucracy involved when you're working with the government. So VA jobs are typically very cush, but also great pension, but you're making significantly less money, right? You're getting great vacation and great pension, but you're not necessarily making a great annual comp. In the traditional models, and I'm talking about the 80s and the early 90s and all before that, IR only existed since 1964. It's not the most historic specialty. So basically, from the 60s on to the 90s, it was really a doctor-patient relationship, right? You were also working with other doctors, but a lot of what you were doing was directly involved in the patient's care. Currently, things have gotten really muddied because there's this third class of people that have come into play here, and that is the administrative class as well as the investor class. So they have taken a lot of the ownership of medicine away from physicians themselves. Now, that's not exclusive to IR. I don't want to ring the alarm bell so you guys log off this chat and then say, I want to be a general surgeon. This is happening for every specialty, not just IR. I think IR has put up a good resistance for those of us who do want to stay independent. It's just, like with everything else, IRs are great at being creative. And that's essentially, if you are interested in being a physician entrepreneur, this is your opportunity to do that, because there are so many different ways to practice. And that's what we're going to try to get into in the next 25 minutes or so. Okay, guys? I'm not going to go into all of these different types. If anyone has interest in learning about any of these specific types, please save your questions for the end, or I can, talk to you offline at a different time. The traditional private practice setup is an IR-DR practice. In many practices, the IRs will get a higher base salary, and then they'll get an increase on that salary based on how productive they are with RVUs. There's a huge catch-22 there, okay? The catch-22 is that you will always make more RVUs being a diagnostic radiologist in the current setup of how this worked. This is not how it was 15 years ago. IRs used to crush on RVUs, right? It's an arbitrary number that's set by other doctors at a closed door meeting, right? That's how RVUs are set. There's not some magic work-based unit or how much effort you put into something. It's just a bunch of doctors getting together, negotiating an arbitrary random number, right? So the fact that IR value has been devalued is essentially due to the lack of advocacy for IR. That's all it is. Because what we've done by having IR-DR models is we've pushed all the RVUs to diagnostic radiology. Why is that? To keep these practices alive. Because 90% of practices in the historic times of IR have been within an IR-DR model. We are seeing that the cracks have really been exposed after COVID. And now many, many, many more IR-only practices are starting to pop up, both in the inpatient and outpatient space. I hope that makes sense to everybody, okay? The thought is that DR, with their higher RVUs, subsidize IR, but IR being the face of the practice, interacting with other doctors, they anchor the contract for the diagnostic radiologist. Unfortunately, that's not how it plays out in a lot of practices in real life. There are plenty of practices that get along great, but there are always people, there are always people out there that are going to make it a little more difficult for everybody and just say, well, why am I working so hard? It doesn't seem like the IRs are. Well, guess what? You're working really hard, and the diagnostic radiologists are working really hard. This is sort of forcing the shift towards the separation of IR and DR. It's happening in real time. It's going to happen within our lifetimes. And, we don't know when, but just remember, radiation oncology used to be part of radiology. It was only 30 years ago that RadOnc split off from radiology, and they still take their boards under the American Board of Radiology, right? They don't have a separate board. So that's very likely to happen with interventional as well. And whether we keep the name radiology in our name, we don't know yet, right? For a refined practice, IR gets to be clinically focused. They have marketing support behind them, and they have a varied amount of work. the big way to get this established is by billing your clinic visits and billing all the rounding you do. If you are an IR in a box, you will not be profitable because a lot of the shifting in the coding has gone towards clinic visits getting way more highly reimbursed as our procedures get devalued year after year after year. Okay. So being a clinically present IR is a big pitch to the hospital. And that's what you need to really learn and focus on in residency, in addition to your technical skills. The current practice models, what happens is as practices get employed or there's private equity that comes in, right? There's a lot of vertical integration that happens in the landscape of healthcare. Everything's owned by something else now, right? That's not how it used to be. There used to be a lot of separate entities, and these separate entities kept pricing very fair, and it was really a fair market exchange of goods and services for what you were getting. This extrapolates to all fields of medicine. Unfortunately, as things get vertically integrated, there's less bargaining. The contracts become ironclad, the scope becomes very, very limited. There's less ownership for the physicians themselves. In addition, and this is a little beyond the scope of our audience today, but there's something called site of service fees. Real big vertically integrated systems like a hospital owned by, a big university system like Northwestern, which has 10 separate hospitals and tens or hundreds of thousands of employees, they can negotiate much better contracts with insurers like United, Cigna, Aetna, and Humana on this screen than a small community hospital can, and even more so than an individual operator can, right? So if you open up your own practice in interventional radiology, you have to advocate for yourself on getting good rates with the insurance companies. And that's really what it boils down to. The relevance of all of this is that historically, the market of interventional radiology was set by private practice. So that was that IRDR group that we sort of talked about. So there was this local value, and then there was a bit of profit sharing with the hospital. In the very old days, it was the physicians that owned the actual machines. So they would take what's called the technical fee, which is associated with every patient getting scanned. They would then share that fee with the hospital. Now, basically, I don't know hardly any hospital-based radiology groups that own any part of the technical fee. We work basically on what's called the professional fee, and I'll get to that in a moment. The value set by private practice is historically what actually set academic salaries back in the day. So at conferences like SIR and other annual meetings, they would learn what the private practice market was doing in their community and in others, and that would get extrapolated, and then contract negotiations would happen in the large academic centers. Unfortunately, with vertical integration, it's hard to tell who's setting what, right? Because on a national scale, the RVUs can be manipulated with, and it becomes a little more challenging. So trying to work directly with contracts yourself may be the way forward for IR. It's confusing, and that's the word I would really use to describe all this. RVU-based compensation in all ways when it comes to procedural specialties is just confusing. So here is sort of the technical talk on how RVUs work. So how radiologists get paid is we get paid with two components of every service that's essentially rendered, right? And this is set by, like I said, this arbitrary Medicare fee schedule, which is made by the AMA, the American Medical Association Resource Utilization Committee, and they submit that to Medicare, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Service, and they basically verify or validate the AMA's recommendations for what's called your CPT-based RVUs, right? So that is why all payers, insurers, private insurers, like you guys have private insurance through your school right now, or through your parents or something like that, those payers are basing their rates based on the RVU rates from the government. Every single one is based on the government, but it might be at a different multiplier depending on where that site of service is. The technical component used to be owned by physicians, as I talked about. That's for the equipment, materials, staff. That would be for efficiencies and overhead in the site of service. And that generally equals a pretty big profit. So the technical side is pretty big. And obviously that's why hospitals were really gunning for that, right? Now they own the MRI machine, not the radiologist. The professional component, which is called modifier 26, is the second part of the RVU and how it gets paid. So that's your actual interpretation of whatever service you do. So if you perform a TIPS procedure, well, your dictation is what guides how they pay the professional component. It may be a 50-minute tips, or it may be a 4-hour tips, depending on what you put for your different tools and the different sites of angiography and stent deployment in that actual procedure. That's what's going to guide modifier 26. And each level is going to be coded based on what you do. Did you use an ultrasound for access? Did your wire go into the hepatic vein? Did it go somewhere else? It's all very technical. And there are entire industries of billing that are based just for IR. Nowadays, because those are not keeping up, like I said, there are many cuts nationally. Stipend requests are actually on the rise. What does that mean? That means that the IRs are actually telling the hospitals, we want to perform this service, but our fee is not keeping up with inflation. So we need to be paid more every year. And so the way you do that is you negotiate a certain amount of the technical, or you just set a fee. And that's why some people just do a non-RVU based employed position with a hospital, right? There's nothing wrong with that. Anytime you're employed by anybody, they're going to ask more. They're going to ask you to do more and try to pay you the same. That's just the way every corporation in America and the world works. So every year they're going to ask for something more, but still ask to pay you the same. And, that is sort of my initial hesitation with employment, having been employed 3 times, right? Typically, it's the clinical procedural specialties like cardiology and surgery that would shy away from this kind of payment. So they usually get what's called a physician service agreement on a stipend, and then they'd get a productivity bonus around that. So they'd set a low floor for RVUs. They'd be like, I can do 6,000 RVUs as a floor. Here's my salary for that. Everything above that, I'm going to share in the global fee that you will bill on my service. And that's honestly an intelligent way to do it. That's how I do it at my company, Gotham Medical, as well. It makes sense. So we have a physician service agreement with the hospital, and anything above a certain number of RVUs, we just get a profit share with the hospital. It makes us partner with them to drive productivity and try to bring in the highest revenue and highest value procedures to the hospital. And that's the big difference with IR and DR, right? It's the reason the two are incompatible to work together. DR, no matter what, diagnostic radiology, 100% of the time will only get paid on the RVU value of the scan that they do. For us, so much of what we do is not RVU based. It's the phone call with the doctor. It's setting up the higher revenue case. It's, tumor board. It's all these other things that people rely on IR on. That's why you need that base salary, because you spend a lot of time doing that. It's, the nurses are calling you about in prep and recovery for some patient who has pain at their insertion site. That's not happening to a diagnostic radiologist. And even less so with AI and with other things coming in that make their life even more optimized to just cranking out scans, right? These are two completely different specialties that just happen to share the name radiology. I mean, that's where we are in 2026. Okay. So the market, like I was talking about, non-academic hospitals are the primary site of service for 85% of hospitals. 85% of hospitals having less than 250 beds in America. The total number of admissions in the United States, 94% of admissions happen in community hospitals. So this is non-government, non-academic center. That is a startling fact. I did not know this until I did this research myself. I thought it was like 60 or 70%. I mean, almost everybody you see where they're getting their main care is at the community hospital. So you being able to deliver this care, and most of you will practice in this setting as well, right? Most of you will not be at a quaternary care center in an academic center for your careers. Some of you will, and that's phenomenal as well. Those are by nature 100% IR jobs. But what we're trying to do is get this out into the community to make this more, more appealing to be fully IR and fully clinical out there in the community as well. The major unmet need of IR really exists about 50 miles outside of hospitals. That's that sweet spot of still being like suburban, having some amount of population, not being too rural, but still having an IR. If you look nationally, the number of counties in the states that have 0 IRs is 80% of counties, right? And that's because there's very little population in those areas. But at the major metros, you have like 7+ IRs. I mean, in Chicago, you've like 50+ IRs, right? And we're not even the third. We're like the third most populated city in the country. so you can imagine what it's like in, LA, New York, Miami, Houston, places like that. It's very similar, a lot of concentration. And where they really need help are on those kind of surrounding satellite communities. So what they found recently is that 347 of 3,147 counties in the United States have a practicing interventional radiologist. So that is, I mean, a little more than 10%, right? That's barely any. And only a little more than that, 869 had any radiologist that could do any procedures. So like, you might have a general radiologist that can do a central line or a para or a thora, but they can't do complex things like we can, right? So what happens? These patients get flown out, helicoptered to sites that do have an IR. This may be for something as simple as like an abscess strain or a difficult biopsy. It may be, and so the need is really there. If there are ties to any communities like that, I have found in my time kind of staffing people all around the country that you are treated really well in these communities. You are not treated like a dime a dozen like you might be in a larger, metro like Chicago or New York. And your skills are very, very valued. They're valued both in time, so your vacation is appropriate. You can set, you'll have more autonomy, as well as, case mix, and you'll be doing the most interesting things you can think of as long as you're marketing along with the hospital your skill set. This is just to show you the number of IRs that are in Chicago, the number of hospitals that have IR basically in Chicago. It's almost every has at least one. The market is basically it's a higher supply in metros. So this is due to physician preference, and we've sort of talked about this. It's a basic supply demand curve. This is a link to a journal article that you guys can get if you'd like to dig into this data any further. And the reason for all of these sort of supply demand issues right now, the reason IRs are doing so well, as well as radiologists in general doing so well, is because there is so much demand for radiology and for IR out there. This is a historic time for the need for IRs and for diagnostic radiologists. Unfortunately, nationally, physician pay is just not keeping up even with inflation, and it has not for about 25 years. Now is the time that the market's sort of resetting a bit for physician pay, but it's typically not happening in the employed jobs. It's typically happening in the independent market more so. There's this very strong reason why this is not in the medical school curriculum, right? And that reason is they want you to be employed, right? Right. The deans of many of your schools, now there's usually a medical school dean that's usually a physician or someone in the medical field. But the overall CEO of your hospitals, I can almost guarantee you, unless you guys are at Northwestern, I can almost guarantee you that they're usually not a physician. Rush and Northwestern being two exceptions to that rule. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm just letting you guys know this is the way the trends happen to be going. Burnout, I'm not going to spend too much time on this. You guys aren't quite here yet. Basically, burnout is real. It exists. You guys are experiencing a lot of stress in med school. I think that the SIR is doing a good job actually working on mitigating some of these things. And remember, you just have to be happy doing what you are actually passionate about. If you are doing 30% diagnostic radiology, but you don't consider yourself deep down within a diagnostic radiologist, well, you're going to burn out faster. Even though you're making great money, you're going to burn out faster because you're not doing what you want to do. You're not able to build your clinic if you're doing 30% IR. It's just the way it works. I mean, there's only X amount of hours in a day. So depending on what you want to build, you should go out there and really build it. The identity of IR is difficult to define. It's something that is being actively worked on in SIR, and the market forces are changing, especially because DR is being inundated with volume. Historic times. AI will never keep up with the amount of volume that is being demanded upon by diagnostic radiologists. You guys, even if you decide to drop out of IR and go into DR because you're scared of AI, don't be. You will have nice, long, fulfilling careers that will be enhanced by AI, and you will never not have a job in DR. Trust me, 100%. Right? You'll be good. The downstream revenue is the biggest thing that IR offers. Right? We order a lot of studies, and our studies are very high end. Every follow up for our cases is usually an MRA or a CTA or an MRI or a CT. We don't do follow up with X-rays like ortho does. Right? So the downstream revenue that we bring to a hospital is a big deal. We are usually in the top 5 of referrers in a mature system, a mature IR system, we're usually within the top 5 of refers in the whole hospital, right? Neurosurgery usually at the top, ortho spine being up there, oncology being up there. IR is right there on that list if you have a developed practice. And these are the big values. I'm gonna have these be emailed out. Maybe like Jason or Nick can get these guys the real value we bring out to the healthcare systems. And these are lessons to bring forward with you as you move forward. So in the private practice setup, in a physician service agreement where you're 100% IR, you want to set clinical boundaries and partner with the hospital and to have the ability to grow and not be limited to what they define IR as. A lot of this is actually educating the hospital partners in what IR is truly capable of, right? They don't know sometimes that we are experts at hepatobiliary management and peripheral vascular disease and a bunch of things that maybe other specialists have been doing for some time. You guys will be very well trained after fellowship or residency, independent or ESIR or integrated, to go out there and market your skill sets. It's very possible in this era of vertical integration. It's harder in major metros, but it's definitely very possible in that sweet spot about 50 miles outside of a major city is what we found. This is typically a stipend plus productivity model, kind of something that we've based our model off of. Remember that not every hospital has a president and CEO that's a doctor, right? At Northwestern, it's actually an IR. That's the hospital president and CEO. That makes it very easy to negotiate when IR needs something. But at the hospital that I'm at, he used to be in construction, and now he's the CEO of this hospital. He was a construction lease lawyer, and so we're explaining what the nitty gritty is, but also having to explain what a paracentesis is, right, directly to him. So these things are really important as you move forward. Capture your audience at their level, right, not at yours. You have a great understanding. You're learning so much going through med school and residency. So we'll talk just a few minutes about independent IR contracting. We'll kind of summarize some things and then open it up for questions. So independent IR contracting is what my other company, Physician Staffing Solutions, is all about. So this is non-employed, what we call a 1099 pay schedule. So you're an independent contractor and you're doing short-term or medium-term recurring contracts for filling in gaps where people need a bridge for coverage. So this has the opportunity to be fully clinical and patient facing, especially if you are partnering at sites where your skill set can be, espoused completely. The requirements is to have an open and independent mindset and be very adaptable to the organizational needs. Who this works for is for early career, it helps gain flexibility and entrepreneurship skills. For mid-career, once you've been in that job that's really burning you out, it gives you kind of a break while you're figuring out your next steps. And for late career, I'm just going to be very honest with you guys because you're on the other ends of your career. I've never seen a successful case of a late career physician going into locums. It doesn't make sense. You're just so set in your ways at that point. It's not a good wind down plan, right? These hospitals need actual help, not someone who's just wants to do things their way. They need really adaptable and nimble people. There are some exceptions, I'm sure, out there, but not within our organization. And we've employed over 60 people at different sites. We've covered over 600 weeks of coverage. So we're pretty well versed in speaking about this stuff. If you're going to get into some kind of work that's independent contracting, try before you're super comfortable and see what it does for you, right? So for a short-term example, you can have a real high return on investment for your time and make good money out of it. Say, for example, you're building an office-based lab. You need a little capital to get that going. Well, you can devote half your year to that and then do a couple weeks or, a certain amount of weeks doing locums type work. And that will sort of give you the autonomy of building your schedule and keep your skill set up as your lab is not quite busy yet, right? Office-based labs, I know you guys see a lot on social media and Twitter. Trust me, it's about 6 to 8 months of building before you ever get more than 2 to 3 patients a week, right? A lot of the stuff you guys see on Twitter, be wary of, right? Anyone who's touting a lot of success up front, they're either probably not full owners in their lab. There's probably some sort of marketing person or a private equity fund behind them, or there's just some shortcut somewhere. And we are very integrated into OBLs because we staff a lot of OBLs around the country with IRs. We know their financials. We know how this works. And one of our three co-founders owns one of the most successful OBLs in the country, linemonkey.com. If you guys have seen that blog, that's one of the co-founders of Physician Staffing Solutions with me. For the long term, independent contracting is a PSA with the hospital. You get to maintain some autonomy. You can work in one site or one or two sites with a small number of people, and you can really become part of the hospital system, right? If you have a skill set that they don't have, say you are doing genicular artery embolizations and they've not brought that into their system yet, well, you can talk to the orthos and start offering that at the hospital. It really adds your value and keeps your skill set alive while you're out there doing some locums work. Your business, that last point, your business is you. So when you are an independent contractor, you are working as an entity that represents yourself. While you are, working for, say, us at Physician Staffing Solutions or IA Locums or Weatherby, you are representing them. You don't want to have a very negative reputation. You really are promoting yourself and learning how to build your own brand. It's something that I think your generation's good at already. Maybe us in the millennial generation wasn't as great as that, but I think it's almost second nature for Gen Zs and kind of the later millennials, those of you on the border. The pros are you get to set your own schedule and define your own boundaries. For skill set, you learn a lot. I mean, I'm now a national advisor for Inari Medical, which is a thrombectomy company. I was the head of the strategic advisory board until they got acquired by Stryker last year. I did my first ever Inari thrombectomy on a locums assignment. You guys wouldn't believe that, but I had never done one either in training or in my private practice jobs before that. But I did my first one on locums. I said, this is amazing. And I brought it back to my home practice. And we developed a program from 0 thrombectomies to over 100 a year within 2 years. It's a great opportunity to also learn and expand your skill set. The pros, the financial is the biggest pro, right? I mean, beyond being autonomous, because you are traveling and because you are the person on call when you are there is a huge ROI. You get to understand the true value of what your job is. It is, double to triple of what you'd make in an employed job. But then again, the rates are always local. So you're going to make more out in, like, we have a contract in Boise, Idaho. The rates out in Boise, dwarf those right here, 20 minutes outside of Chicago, as you would imagine, right? Or the ones in New York City. Those are going to be more common rates that you'd see elsewhere versus a smaller town, Springfield, Illinois, you're going to make a lot more than you would. And it's all, and that's a true market. That's a true fair market value based on the supply demand curve, which is different than how a lot of IR economics works and employment economics works. The drawbacks is that this can be short term, right? The locums company could lose their contract. It's possible, right? They could fill internally. The second thing would be travel if you have a family. And then you could lack some clinical presence in your own home community where you want to have more of an impact, right? The one about the stigma, I think that's going away because of how in demand this stuff is. I don't think locums are necessarily seen as a gun for hire. That's certainly something that we're trying to change. But if you were to ask 10 years ago, and I did a survey on this 10 years ago, I presented at SIR. Pretty much across the board, academic program chairs were like, we would never hire a locums. We'd rather have, all of our guys work 4 extra weeks a year on call. We would never hire locums because we'll never know what their skill set is. Well, that's what we're trying to change, right? We're trying to bring in people who are all the highest quality. And I hope more locums companies try to match skill set with site, because we've seen and heard of disasters and horror stories from placing the wrong person on site. Can it be clinical? Well, in short, yes, it's as clinical as you are, right? It's just, are you going to put yourself out there? Are you going to market your skill set? Are you going to let them know what they're missing? And are you going to offer suggestions? Are you also going to be willing to learn from the other referrers and from your partners who are there on site, or how their lab does it? I mean, maybe their techs and nurses are so experienced, they can teach you something new that was not already part of your bag. You can get involved in clinic. We had someone do 30 weeks of locums for us last year at one site, and she became very, very integrally, associated with the clinic. The clinic basically ran through her. She did all the Y90s, she did all the ablations, she did all the complex venous disease cases, And honestly, she came from a university hospital here in Chicago. She left that job full time to do this full time. And working 30 weeks there, I can tell you she made triple what she made at the university working 45 weeks. So am I saying this is the right career path for everybody? No, but she had about 8 years of clinical experience at a university setting before that. So she was like good to go. And it was the right time for her. Always seek good mentorship and advice, and you can find places where you can be clinical and make a huge impact. The routes to get to short term, the one that you will hear the most about are placement firms. Now, we are a placement firms. We're the only one that's physician based. There are other ones that are basically huge marketing firms, right? They will have intermediaries to help credential, and they'll have very limited understanding of the service line. So when they're recruiting for IR, you'll see all their credentials at the bottom. They'll be like senior recruiter for IR, pathology, oncology, and podiatry, right? So they know as much of each of those specialties as they do about IR. Now, it would take a lifetime, and it's taking you guys a lifetime to become IRs. So they won't know essentially what the hospital needs, and they won't know what you need. A good options are really direct contracting or getting word of mouth referrals for people who really understand the specialty to do anything like independent contracting. The words that will really trap you are this quote at the bottom: "Send me your CV and I'll present you to the client." Don't do that. When you present them, when you are presented by a firm, you can never work at that hospital ever. That's how their contracts work. You can never work at that hospital ever unless it's through that company moving forward. Okay. We've had lots of people get trapped by that. And then essentially either you or the hospital has to buy you out of that presentation fee. And they have that fee set up with the hospital when they come in as a vendor. Okay. So keep that in mind. The other thing to keep in mind is that those recruiters typically take about 30 to 60% of your hard work money. Even though it seems like a lot to you, just know that they are making that by sitting behind a computer. Not necessarily, say you work 20 weeks there, even on week 20, they're making that same margin on every single day you work there for doing absolutely nothing. Yeah, maybe they provide you the flights. Well, I mean, that's not worth 30% of your time, going out there to the site. You can do that yourself, or you can work with, companies that are a little more ethical. So the other routes, the ones I prefer are direct contracting or like an IR own placement model, because direct contracting can be a little difficult with cold calling or word of mouth. It is a time suck, but you're going to get the best ROI direct contracting, and you'll be fully autonomous. Some of the things that we've tried to do with our company is to just get the vetted people into the right spot, present those opportunities. And then also get the best rates for the doctors. We don't take 30 to 60%. We all have full-time jobs, not retiring over this. We're trying to do this because of the pain points that we found trying to direct contract and then also working through those kinds of companies. As far as contracting, and Jason, how much time do I have left? Jason or Nick, sorry. Where am I?
Maybe about 5 minutes. That's
Okay,
okay.
that's perfect. Yeah, I only have about 5 slides left. So what this sort of means for you, what the global summary, because we've sort of talked about two or three different tangential topics to each other, is that the market is very much changing in real time. Keeping apprised of all of these types of data and information are really important, especially as you enter your M4 year. And then really, really importantly, as you get into your latter years of residency. The goal for your first 3 years of residency is to be the best resident in your program. You need to learn all of DR in that contracted period because you will have less DR if you're an integrated IR resident, right? You got to be the best. And that's what Bob Lewandowski told me when I started as an R1 at Northwestern. I asked him, can I be on a project with you? He said, you can be on a project with me when you know how to read a CTA from top to bottom, and your diagnostic. He mentioned a body radiologist. When she tells me that you are in the top 2 or 3 of your class, before that, you're not getting on any projects with me. And that's the reality, guys. That's what I tell people as well. You have to be academically doing awesome because that's the best impact on patient care, right? Your fellowship and your or whatever they call it, the second part of your residency, the integrated residency, if you guys are in a diagnostic program, is not going to care as much if you did a project as an R1. What they're going to care about is how you are doing academically and how you are socially as a person. You got to sit next to these people in the lab or at their workstation every day, and they just want to make sure, like, they're with people that they want to hang out with. That's how we look at residents, and that's how we look at med students as well when we're looking at for residency, right? Your skill set when you finish fellowship is going to be very scarce. I showed you that map of how lacking IRs are nationally. Your skill set's so required. This is the future of medicine. Every field says that, but don't believe them. We actually are. We are the future. We are just in 60 years redefined all of medicine. There's interventional everything now. I literally heard a talk where people were talking about interventional psychiatry a few weeks ago. I like spit out my juice that I was drinking because it was absurd. I've made this joke myself. I'm like, oh, what's next? Interventional psychiatry. I actually heard it a few weeks ago. And here we are in 2026, right? Interventional services and interventional radiology is already the future of medicine. We're living in it, and it's only going to get better over time. So connect with patients, work efficiently, be the best doctor you can. That's still rules number one through five, right? When it comes to things like what I talked about with locums, with independent contracting, and with with your own group or kind of separating from diagnostic radiologists, make that jump earlier than you think comfortable with. If that's something that you think is going to bug you, don't wait 10 years to do it. Okay. You will become very complacent. A lot of you will have children. A lot of you will have, a lot of other things that pop up in life. It's easier to do that early when you have a little more, wind beneath your sails and you can really get going on things than when you're kind of stuck in your mid 40s. It's much harder to get that inertia going. Okay. I'm not saying to do that from your first year out of training. Find good mentors, and you can really make a huge impact early. And talks like these are going to become just an integral part of IR literacy, as I talked about. A few things I wish I knew as a resident is that your first job is not always a forever job. I've switched jobs 3 times. The average first job length is 16 months in IR, right? Mine was 13 months. So it's right around there. And I know so many people who have left multiple jobs already in this market, right? There's more employment, and I'll reiterate that there's more employment and there's less ownership. The more employed you are, the less tied you are, right? People leave Tesla for Rivian all the time because they're employed, right? Elon Musk is not leaving Tesla for Rivian because he owns Tesla. So think about ownership as part of your path. You may make less money up front, but you will be able to own something. And it's not for everybody, but it is a mindset, right? You have to be able to make that leap internally. The track you guys are on, college, med school, residency, everything's in a straight line. Once you get out there, it really does diverge a lot. There are a lot of options. I know plenty of people who work full-time in a vein clinic, in a strip mall, plenty of IRs, right? Versus other people who work downtown at Northwestern or Rush. There's so many ways to do this, right? You have a lot of leverage, and the distance outside of a major metro increases that leverage exponentially. The last thing is that mentorship is not just in your medical practice. It's all along in this room. It's every single room you sit in for the next, 6-7 years of your life, and indefinitely. I learn from people all the time. When some of you go to SIR in a few weeks, you're going to learn from so many different types of people, and in ways that you didn't even think you needed to learn about at the time. The last thing is to always think about your fair market value when you're talking to C-suites. This is years down the road for you guys. I'm going to skip this. What you need to know is that hospitals really want retention and reduce leakage of patients to other hospital systems, right? They want to control the local market. So what you are selling is also your ability as an IR, but really importantly, the stability of being someone who's grounded in and committed to that community. It's not just the procedures. And I know a lot of people come into IR to do cool procedures, but having that stability of being someone who can be relied upon is really important. For you, your task is to define your own goals internally. This is what the hospital needs, but you need to define what you want internally. I think I have 1 or 2 more slides. For your first job, I'm going to skip this. You guys are not quite there yet. And I think that's pretty much it. So for final thoughts, IR contracting independently is a legitimate, high demand growth market. It's basically a blue ocean. There's a lot of hospitals that need this right now, and this is only gonna be exaggerated over the next few years. This is not going anywhere, guys. Same thing for teleradiology, for diagnostic radiology. Okay. so this will still be relevant to you in 5 or 6 years when you guys are looking for, some work out there when you're a year or two out of practice. You really need to know your worth, define that as you go through residency, stay active, stay in the networks, talk to each other. The most important network right now here that you guys have are going to be these other WCVIS people who are already interested at this stage in sort of defining their career, are people who are you're going to want to keep in touch with for years down the road, right? You don't want, like, you're going to be in touch with all your co-residents and things like that, but the people in this room are already showing such an interest in this field. You're most likely going to be the impact makers for our field when I'm totally gray top to bottom, and I'm like just in my rocking chair looking back at what cool stuff you guys are doing for IR as we move forward. I'm in my early 40s. You guys are going to be me in before you know it. It's going to go really, really quickly. And the networks I have from societies like this in med school and then in my residency are people I talk to every day. It is really, really important. This is a great, great, great group of people. I want to thank you guys for the time that you allowed me tonight. Sorry to go a little bit over. And I'm available for you guys for any questions and things you want to get into. Either now in a Q&A, or if you'd like to be more private about it, feel free to send me an email or find me on social. All right, cool, guys.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Desai, for taking the time to speak with us and sharing your insights on the VIR job market. We don't have much time left, but we'd love to open up the floor for a few questions from the audience. If you have anything, feel free to unmute yourselves or put it in the chat.
I have a question if no one has one. Thank you very much for speaking with us today, Dr. Desai. One of the things that I noticed that you mentioned earlier on in the presentation was finding a job where you can impact the patients to the highest degree. I'm wondering what variables and what questions you should be looking for and asking in that job that you're interviewing at.
Yeah, that's such a good question, Nick. I'm sorry, and this was part of my talk, so let me try to share this one more time. I actually skipped over that slide, so I apologize about that. Can you see this?
Yep, we can see it now.
Okay. So when you are evaluating your first job, something we spoke about a little earlier in the talk was what percent is IR versus DR if it's that traditional IR DR group. If you think you should be 100% IR, if that's what's really, driving you internally, I don't think you should be compromising that. That's what I did. I spent, I'm 8 years out of practice. My first 8 years, I was compromising a bit by doing some diagnostic radiology. Now, I don't quote regret that. I still have the skill set. But I sort of wish I had made the jump a little earlier, maybe 4 or 5 years out. The market was obviously very different back then, right? There were just not a lot of jobs. In this market, there is enough out there to probably find the 100% job. There is also the option of just doing 100% IR, and then you can do teleradiology on the side, right? So I do that. I have one or two teleradiology contracts that are hop on, hop off. When I have free time, I will do a couple of reads, keep my skill set up, but I know that that's basically just a side gig. I take my IR job as my passion and full-time job. For clinic, I think this is the biggest one if you are a true clinically minded IR. So how valued is clinic in your section? Is it protected time, or can they draw you from clinic if, say, someone else calls out, or if they have a diagnostic radiologist, if you're in a traditional group, if they have a diagnostic radiologist that's not available to make their shift, are they going to pull you from clinic? My last job, they never did that a single time. Clinic was protected time, and that was in our contract. And the staffing of the clinic is really important. You always want at least one person. It can just be an MA. An ideal IR clinic will have an APP as well as someone else like an MA who can help with scheduling. So an MA can help with scheduling, taking vitals, and rooming patients. An APP would help with the actual clinical intake and the physical exam and things like that. And then you come in as the expert. Then you are just running 3 rooms at the same time. Yeah. If you're a little less developed and you just have an MA in you, then you'll be doing those other things, but you should all have the skill set to do that. The last thing is growth. If your growth doubles in volume, like, is there something in your contract that guarantees that your staff will sort of double or, you know, go along with those growth terms as well, right? Because these are all things that are reimbursed with E&M coding, which stands for evaluation and management coding. So writing a clinic note actually pays pretty decently nowadays. The next thing is call. So how's it subsidized? Is call subsidized with time or extra money? And which one do you prefer? Sometimes groups will, you know, the senior partners will sell call, so they'll give up their call, and then the junior partners can get paid to take some of that call. Who does subsidize it? Is it the whole group or just the IR section that does that? For some people, time's more important. For some people, it's money. And then for me, it's all about learning environment. I mean, titles are great, right? I mean, titles are awesome. You know, I'm the chief of this, and I'm the whatever. Like that stuff is so it's very like 80s, 90s. That stuff is very not important, right? People are doing incredible thing in community. Like the biggest advisors to med tech companies are not academic physicians. They don't see the volume that private practice does, and the efficiency of a private practice doctor is unmatched by anybody, right? You are cranking. You are doing so many high volume cool cases all the time, that you have to really decide which way you want to go. If you are interested in research, if you are really interested in academics, like truly education, there's only one place you can do that, and that's at a big hospital. You need to make that decision internally. That is not something that someone else can guide you to. Money should not be everything. Everyone does well as an IR. Even the least paid IR in the country does fine. Trust me, they do completely great, and the data is public, so it's not like, you know, it's not something that we're like, it's on Doximity, and then it's also in the MGMA, which collects our data, right? It's you're gonna do fine. Be happy. Seriously, I think your generation's way better about it than my generation, and definitely like baby boomers and like Gen X, right? Like they gave up everything to just make the extra X amount of dollars. That I think that time is gone. But just keep that in mind as you go through this struggle. Be happy, protect your clinic time, and just be a good partner to the hospital so they're good to you, right? Or if you're setting up your own, you know, thing, just protect the things that matter to you. No one's going to do it for you. So seek mentorship in that. The final things are to, when you are looking at a contract, always see what the duration and the geography of your non-compete is. I know multiple people who have been sort of screwed over by that, right? They can't practice at the place they want to practice next because the geography distribution of the non-compete is like 2 years and 100 miles of any hospital that we own. And it's like some big hospital network that owns like 10 hospitals, right? You never set foot into 9 of those, but now you can't work within 100 miles of any of their sites. So be scouring those contracts when you come out, right? For scope and hiring, firing, you know, hopefully you guys have good heads on your shoulders, and you're looking at that already. And then, you know, the last thing is how can you exit the job with more favorable terms if this is just not what was proposed to you, right? You may have something like a 6-month clause. A lot of physicians have very tough contingency clause for exiting the practice because they need time to replace you with a new physician. That's the typical excuse, right? They need 4 to 6 months to replace you with somebody else. So they keep you on working for that time. But if the job is really something that you did not sign up for, right? You signed up for a 90% IR job, but now you're reading scans every day and you get to do occasional pick lines. That's not the job you signed up for. You need to have some sort of understanding, either verbal or in writing, to say, if this is truly not what I signed up for, that needs to basically be negated. And I can leave on a standard 2-week clause, like every other job in the country. Right? It's only physicians that have these long exit clauses. And so that's something that you can either get in writing, or more likely what I've seen is people getting that verbally and then having that passed down if it comes about. One of the big things is that if it's not in, you know, this is a big axiom from all contract negotiation. If it's not in writing, it never existed. I mean, I tend to put everything in writing, but it really depends on on how you go about your initial contract negotiations. It's hard when you're first coming out. It's really hard. Like these are people who do this every day, all the time, and they want to be seen as warm and fuzzy and personal as possible. But once things are signed from both sides, it can be brutal out there. It really can be brutal. Not to scare you guys too much because you'll all do fine, especially starting with sessions like this and kind of getting the 411 and all this. But I've seen it go pretty bad for some people. So just be leery. It's a good question there.
Thank you.
Yep.
Great. So we are past our ending time. So I think we can wrap it up here. If you have any other questions, feel free to contact Dr. Desai privately. But again, thank you so much, Dr. Desai, for this incredibly informative talk. Um, I think we can definitely take a lot away from this. Maybe not right now at our current stage, but in the future. And thank you for everyone who joined us this evening. We hope to see you at one of our future events. Have a good evening, everyone. Thank you.